May I have your attention, please?
Welcome to Real Gaijin, unveiling the real Japan, an American expat's inside look. Now it's time for another story from the Read My Lips series of podcasts. Summarized podcast.
We are live, and it's 8 o'clock. Good morning in Japan. This is Mark Kennedy, the host of Real Gaijin. I am pleased to introduce to you Mr. Cory McGowan. He is the head coach. He's also the founder of Adventure Partner in Gunma Prefecture. Cory, you want to say hello?
Hey, everybody.
Oh, all right, great. Well, first of all, I'm sure you noticed, I did right away. Look at that background of where Cory is. Gets you in the mood. It feels like an adventure partner experience already. All you can see behind me is a green screen, but it's not going to be the same when we do record. And I just wanted to remind everyone, just in case you missed this or can't stay for the entire time, we will be recording this. Give me about 24 hours, but I'll get it done by Wednesday at the very least, at the latest. So, in keeping with the tradition here at Real Gaijin, the objective here is to introduce to you one fellow Real Gaijin, a real foreigner living in Japan at a time. We have about 3.7 billion people to go, but we're now on to Mr. Cory McGowan. Cory, you are from one of my favorite places in the entire world, Maine. Tell us, after you were born in Maine, what happened?
So I was actually born in Massachusetts. So I don't think I told you that when we talked. But yeah, more recently from Maine, but have been in Japan now basically since 1999. Maine is also one of my favorite places in the world. Favorite place in the U.S. next to, I lived in the Northwest for a while as well, in Washington State, Seattle, and surrounding areas. And that is also a very beautiful place. So, you know, the two coasts, the two Northeast and Northwest coasts, got to be two of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah. That is terrific. Yeah. How did you get from there on the North American continent to Japan? What was the backstory here?
So I spent most of my 20s traveling around. I studied French and Spanish at university, and so starting with study abroad, and then just like a unquenchable thirst for traveling overseas and going on adventures. So I had been doing that basically since I got out of college. And a friend of mine had been living in Tokyo for a couple of years. He came back to the US and said, yeah, I want to go back and work on my Japanese. Why don't we go together? And I hadn't been to Asia yet. Seemed like an interesting idea. And I was particularly interested in studying Japanese just because it's such a different language than the other foreign languages I had learned so far. And so, yeah, landed down in Aichi, in a place called Okazaki, where there's a school, a Japanese school for foreigners. Ran out of money almost immediately, and it was either go home or get a job. So I got an English teaching job, and I really enjoyed it. I come from a background of educators, so I really liked working with kids in particular. And yeah, it became a place that I fell in love with really quickly. I really tried to surround myself with with Japanese people because I really wanted to get the language. So I actually learned to speak the language pretty quickly. And then one of my kind of foolish mistakes was I'll just be here for a few months, so I don't need to pay much attention to kanji.
And now, I don't know detail.
25 years later, I'm still kicking myself that I'm not better at that. I mean, computers help a lot, but yeah. So those were the beginnings.
Okay, and so while you were down based in Aichi Prefecture, that's not too far from Gifu or further into the mountains, Nagano. I imagine you made a few excursions up that way?
Yeah. So I used to ride bicycles a lot, so I rode around the area on my bicycle a lot. And then my neighbor actually gave me a motorcycle, and so I started motorcycle touring. And that was a great way to see like the Gifu area. I went on to Wakayama a bit. And yeah, I just started to really see different parts of the country and be kind of blown away about, what a great place it is to travel and just how much you have this idea that Japan is small because it's an island, and it's just like the diversity of places and people and things to do. It's really amazing.
That's great. But your essential love of the outdoors, though, dates back to, I assume, all the way back to Maine, maybe Massachusetts.
Yeah. So my dad was a pretty outdoorsy guy, and so as a family, we would do, camping and canoeing and all that kind of stuff. So it was from a pretty young age. And then again, like the traveling that I did before I came to Japan, a lot of that was outdoor based. Like my longest adventure was a 4-month sea kayak expedition down in Baja California. I paddled. There's an inland sea there called the Sea of Cortez, and I paddled that solo when I was in my early 20s. Yeah, it was
Whoa.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's out there. So, okay. Then, though, you found your way into Tokyo, it seems like, right?
Yeah, so I went back from the US for a short time from Aichi. My mom got sick and unfortunately passed. And I decided that I wasn't done with Japan and got back um, into an English teaching gig, but it was actually a much bigger school with a franchise and multiple locations, and moved pretty quickly into management there and eventually recruiting teachers. And that got me more interested in that type of work, and that eventually got me to Tokyo, doing the other thing that all foreigners do here, which is recruiting.
Ah,
uh,
yeah. Okay.
so I did that for a pretty short time. It was a great company, but it wasn't. I didn't really feel like I fit in there. And then a friend of mine called me with an opportunity at this interesting. It was basically a startup then, a company called Kidzania, which is what's called an edutainment theme park that was based out of Mexico, and the Tokyo location was the first global location. So I came in there. It's like a city for kids where they learn how to use money and how to try different jobs and that type of thing. So I came in there as a trainer initially, and then quickly moved into management and up to a director level role. And so got a an inside view of just how wacky management can be, like in general, but then also
Ooh.
in Japan, because it was a totally Japanese run
Mhm.
organization. Yeah.
Great. And then, so what did you do after that, though?
So because the management stuff was so wacky, it got me really curious about, like, why is management this way? Why is leadership this way? Started to learn a bit more about organizational development, and then got to move to the Tokyo American Club, where I had a role doing organizational development. Um, Also, another great organization, probably one of the most diverse organizations in Tokyo in terms of the staff that work there and also
Mm.
the membership. So really great opportunity. And while I was there, I decided to get certified as a coach, as a leadership coach, and did some of that internally. And then also, that's when the move out to Minakami happened. So I have a family. I have a Japanese wife and 2 boys, and we had been talking for a while about getting out of the city. I'd been talking for a while about getting out of the city, and my wife was playing along. And then a friend of ours had a home out here in Minakami, which is about an hour, like west northwest of Tokyo by bullet train. And so we started using that vacation home a few times a year. And then one day I was just like, we could do this move. And somehow my wife was willing to talk more about that, and we made that happen. Um, yeah, which
Terrific.
was
Well,
yeah,
great. I want to come back to that because
yeah,
I share that background too.
yeah,
Back to the quote unquote organizational development
yeah,
role.
yeah.
I'm kind of guessing that you are purposely not using the term HR.
Not no, actually not intentionally. I was in the HR department, and there was a time where I was gunning for my boss's job, who was the HR director.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a really powerful part of an organization, right? And when done well, it can have huge impact. So, but in Japan, like my Japanese, I don't think was really good enough to really be as valuable as I could be in that role. Um, and then also, I think it was more of me like trying to play along and play the career game than it was like a passion for wanting to be in that. So fortunately, the move out here and then the other stuff that we can talk about later came along, which helped me to see that that was definitely glad I didn't end up there. Yeah.
Okay, good. Before you made the move out into Minakami,
Yeah.
did you go and get your leadership training in disc and so forth?
I have been trained in something called global disc, which is
Okay.
slightly different than normal disc, but that's the only assessment that I have a certification in, and we can
Okay.
we can talk about assessments if you want, although it might bore people might bore people to death if we get into
Well,
it.
I
But
tell you,
I
maybe
have
you could
thoughts
just.
on it.
All right. Well, we can briefly touch on that. Can you just explain though what is global disc for those that haven't actually gone through a program like that?
Yeah, I mean it's similar to disc, and it's basically looking at these different categories of kind of how people's um and I'm trying to remember what the difference is between disc. It's basically looks at it in a slightly different way that disc does. This is like 8 years ago that I've done this, so I
Okay.
apologize for not being clear on it. But it's similar, but it looks at it like basically like a little bit more of a global mindset than the typical disc assessment
Okay.
works.
Okay. Good. Great. Well, I do remember going through DISC and learning what my profile is. I'm sure you guessed right away after we started corresponding. But in any case, it is useful. Okay, I'm absolutely curious to hear more about the decision to move out into the countryside from Tokyo, since that's something that I did almost 6 years ago to the day.
Yeah,
And
nice,
uh,
nice.
so maybe, I mean, you got your foot in the door essentially by using that location as a vacation home for a while.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then what pushed you over the edge essentially?
It was literally like going out on a Sunday run one day and coming back and just had it. This is like when I run, that's when I get kind of my most of the ideas, the endorphins running through my body. It was just like, why couldn't we just live here? And literally called my wife out onto the deck at this beautiful place we're staying. It was like, we can move here, and here's why I could work. And you know, when my wife doesn't immediately say no and shut me down, I know there's a chance of something happening. And it made sense in a lot of ways. Like our boys at the time were like around 10 and 7 years old. So they were still like open to everything. They
Mm.
weren't going to be too concerned about leaving their friends. Miho had just had like a job contract finishing up, so it actually made sense for her to make a
Ah,
shift. She was interested in making the shift from working full time to being with the boys full time. Um, and amazingly, yeah, the American Club, which is pretty conservative with making sure everyone gets treated equally, was able to support me not only commuting by Shinkansen, but also allowing me to be a little bit flexible with my work because I could work for an hour on the train both ways every day.
ah,
Um, so just like all these pieces kind of fit together,
mm.
and we weren't sure where we were going to live. But when we told the people that own the house that we're moving out to Minakami, they immediately said, "Oh, just live in our house." So we moved
Well, okay
from
then.
a 70 square foot apartment to 70 square meter apartment to a 200 square meter, basically Australian party house on this river.
Ah,
So,
so
yeah,
tough choice, huh? I got it.
yeah, everything
Oh,
just
that's
fell into
terrific.
place immediately. Yeah, it was
That's
pretty
great.
amazing. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so then you continue to work at the Tokyo American Club
yep,
via Shinkansen.
yep,
Very
yep,
interesting for
yep.
a while, but then something must have gotten you thinking or planted the seed for running your own business, right?
Well, actually, before that, there's a bit more drama that happens before that, but there is a really big outdoor and adventure company here called Canyons. It's the biggest in Minakami, probably one of the biggest in Japan.
Hmm.
It's the company that actually brought canyoning to Japan. And the guy who runs it, Mike, is a friend of mine, and we actually met on the Shinkansen and started talking about some stuff. And he basically needed a right hand man. And I was like, oh yeah, this seemed like
Mhm.
the gig. So I got to take a role there as COO. So it was kind of a first, really senior management level role for me. Pretty complex organization, because they do green season operations, but they also do winter operations in multiple locations in Japan.
Wow.
So it was really an interesting opportunity. But then within a year of that, COVID had come in and basically shut things down. That was probably the biggest contributing factor. And then there were some other, just some misalignments in kind of our vision of how things should work. And so, yeah, I was out of a job after I had promised my wife to stay at my Tokyo job.
Ah,
She had made the exception for me to take on the new role at a lot less money, because she could see how interested I was in it. And then that was gone, and it was COVID, and it was like, it was a pretty dark time. It was, it was a dark time for everyone. And my version of that was basically having lost all my confidence, like not having any idea what to do, thinking like I'm gonna have to put a suit back on and go back into that damn city. And I knew I didn't want to do that because we'd been getting so settled into life here. Um, and this is when I hired a coach for myself for the first time, and started to get into conversation about like, what if there's something that I'm not seeing in this? And she was really amazing in helping me to see that not only could I start my own business, because that had never been an ambition of mine. I never
oh,
aspired to be an entrepreneur at all. Just never thought about it. Um, so not only could I do that, but actually I could do it in a way that, what if the coaching and leadership actually involved the stuff that I love to do? What if I could blend them together? If I could build it any way that I want. And that was the birth of Adventure Partner. My coach actually came up with the name, and it's just like, hell yeah, that's what
wow.
it is. So yeah, that was a big shift, and that was almost 5 years ago now.
Oh, so you just jumped right into it, I suppose, in the midst of COVID, plan the
Yeah,
launch.
yep, yeah, and it was. I mean, launch makes it sound maybe more exciting than it was, but it was basically just saying, in Japan, I'm freelance, right? I don't have
Yeah.
a LLC or anything like that. And I was really lucky in the timing in some ways, because thanks to COVID, it was all of a sudden like people were thrown into like, yes, coaching can happen online, right? Because it used to be a lot more face to face. You'd go to an executive's office and you'd work with them face to face there, and that was a big part of it. And all of a sudden, it was like, well, we can do this online, and there were these different platforms popping up where you could be on the platform and be matched with clients. And so I immediately started to get to work with clients all around the world, all kinds of different organizations. And so, yeah, it was lucky timing, and pretty fun way to start.
That is fascinating. I mean, you started from a point of adversity.
Hmm.
Okay, please maybe back up though. What is an executive or professional coach? I mean, how does that differ
Hmm.
from like a coach for a sports team?
Yeah. In some ways they're similar. I mean, both are trying to help you kind of get the best results for you. Um, Probably a lot of sports coaches wouldn't say that they're helping their athletes to transform, but they probably are.
Mm,
Basically, meaning, to transform is a word that gets bandied around a lot, but it basically means that you can't get new results by being kind of the same person that you are, right? Like
mm.
it's physical changes, but also there's beyond that. There's overcoming kind of mental limitations that you have. And so in those ways that they're similar, probably one of the key differences though is that sports coaching athletes are experts in the sport, right? They've
Mm,
generally done it to a very high level.
mm.
And leadership and executive coaching, that's not a requirement, and actually sometimes can get in the way of being able to support leaders, because the craft of coaching is to be able to come to these different situations and issues that clients are dealing with a completely different perspective,
Mm.
right? And if you're an expert in the field or an expert in the industry, then there are things that and that you have a bit more bias towards, like, maybe you should try this, kind of more about like advising and consulting. um, Whereas kind of like the quote unquote purest form of coaching, you're not doing that at all. right? You're basically using two key tools with clients. One is questions, and generally open questions. And the other is reflections. So basically acting like a mirror for the person you're working with, saying, I'm noticing this, or I see you doing this a lot, and not with any opinion either way, but just reflecting it back and seeing, like, is that, for example, is that what you want to be doing? Or yeah. So yeah, the at the heart of the work, we're helping leaders to expand their own capacity, right? So that basically they should be able to do more of what they wanted to do, create more of the results that they want to do through their own um, knowledge, wisdom, experiments, those type of things. And we just partner along with them to be willing to step into that more and to step out of what are kind of typical patterns for them in their work and in their lives.
That is a great way of putting it. And now, in the midst of COVID, I could see how you have to do a lot of this online, but especially given that fantastic location where you're sitting right now, how do you balance the face-to-face time? I mean, literally face-to-face time out in Minakami and online.
Yeah. So the kind of the key way that my work is structured is that I will have leaders come out to Minakami to do what I call a wilderness visioning retreat at the beginning of the work. Okay. So generally, clients engage me for a full year of work, right? We go really deep into stuff that they're working on. And so what that first 4-day retreat is to kind of name what should things look like at the end of the year, right? And to get really deep into, like, what would that be for? What's the vision of it? What would it feel like to be there? And being here just has so many advantages. One, it takes them out of their normal environment, right? So that immediately starts to work on getting you out of, typical patterns and distractions. And then, nature then just acts as like a third entity in the work, right? Like the way that things smell, the way that things feel, allows us to kind of to access a deeper wisdom and a deeper remembering that we don't normally have when we're in our cubicle or in front of our computer screen or whatever. And then, on the 4 days, one of those key days is going on some kind of an adventure. And it's generally something that is custom to each client based on things that I know about them and things that are kind of challenging for them. So the point is to kind of help them to be uncomfortable, but not in extremes, right? I'm not I don't actually I don't actually do a lot of what I would consider extreme adventure stuff myself. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of my clients, even being in the outdoors and away from like their phones and their family and their work for 4 days is it's pretty intense. So it's, it may be some kind of a hike. It may be, we have rivers here, so we do a lot of water-based stuff. But the point of it is to have them experience like a complex, unpredictable situation similar to the way that their jobs are, right? Because then we get to see some of the stuff that comes up when they're in it, and then again, that reflection tool becomes really powerful because I notice, like, for example, we do something called, one of the activities I take clients on is pack rafting, and it's like an inflatable kayak basically, and you can do downriver stuff, and you can see, like, as soon as the river gets a little bit rough, like, clients starting to panic or freak out. And one, that's natural because they probably haven't done it before, but two, it's like, oh great, you're coming into some unfamiliar, like, where's your breath right now, right? Or what are you noticing in your body?
Is there hyperventilating?
Down, right. Yeah, but it helps because then they can build some muscle and some memory around, like, oh yeah, when I'm in these unfamiliar situations, these are the things that I notice that I kind of go to as like typical responses, but actually these other things are available as well. These other ways of responding are available.
Well, you already answered my next question, which was how much is this like a Kill Bill experience? I guess to a certain extent, at least on one day, a little bit like that. Okay,
Yeah,
terrific.
yeah.
Now, I'm curious, what kind of client would be the typical customer here, the person that wants to get coached? Is this like a president of a company or mid-level executive?
Are you talking about for coaching in general? Are you talking about more like the clients that I work with?
Well, your clients in particular. Huh.
Yeah, I've worked with quite a variety. I tend to work with kind of like director level role up to yeah leaders of organizations like C-level
Okay.
roles. But I've worked with quite a variety. Again, I consider myself pretty new to this still. Like I'm only in my fifth year, and so I've
Mhm.
tried to have a really broad range of clients that I've worked with so far. But generally more and more I'm working with the higher level executives mainly because I know that's where we can have the most impact, right? So my kind of love of this work and what keeps me coming back to it is that I get to have some kind of impact with the leaders that I work with on the world, right, and on their businesses. And so, of course, people at higher levels of organizations, if they get to develop their leadership and model how to transform and kind of better themselves, then that works its way down through the organization and has really good impact across the organization. So, and it's also, uh, I invite a pretty high level of commitment, both in terms of the financial investment, but that the year is a long commitment to be in
Mhm.
this work. And so it tends to be with higher levels of leaders that can make those types of decisions about their money, about their schedule, and also about the impact that it will have on the organization.
That is terrific. Say, are most of your clients multinational corporations or are many of them Japanese companies?
That's also a mix. That's a mix.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to work um, probably more than 50 or 60%, around 50%, 60% of my clients are non Japanese clients based in Japan.
Mhm.
And they're
Okay.
working either at multinational or at Japanese organizations. I've worked with a good number of Japanese clients as well, but I do all my coaching in English.
Yeah.
So I work with Japanese clients who feel comfortable enough in English to have regular conversations. I do speak Japanese, so I can support in Japanese as well. Um, but I find working with Japanese clients in English kind of allows them to step out of like the hierarchical nature of Japanese and also kind of their own patterns of like education and that type of thing. And that working with them in English tends to open things up a bit for them. So,
That's fascinating. I'm curious just a little bit more about that. I mean, for a multinational corporation, particularly
yeah,
my experience working for an American firm,
yeah,
employing a professional coach like this on a yearly basis
yeah.
or on a year's schedule is pretty normal. But
Mhm.
I wouldn't expect that from a Japanese company.
Yeah.
Is my expectation wrong? Is this common or?
No, it is challenging. It is challenging,
Okay.
and more what's probably the some of the longer term clients with that I've worked with that are Japanese. Um, it's more like we do 6 months and then they renew, right? It becomes
Uh,
an easier conversation to make a 6 month contract and then renew that. So yeah, you're right. It is less the norm here, and also what can be quite challenging about the Japanese market is that companies tend to spend a lot less on training and development and leadership development. So the fees tend to be lower, and it's a higher hurdle to get a good proposal across.
Got it. Well, I mean, I'm kind of assuming based on your previous comment there that once, particularly if you can hook the top executive in a firm and they have a positive experience, which I'm certain that they would working with you, then they'll probably want their next level down to go through the same program.
Hopefully, but that's also another challenge in working with Japanese people, um, is that they may not want other people on their team to know they're working with a coach. because
Oh,
it can still be
oh,
seen as like, oh well, you're not good enough, or there's something wrong, or whatever. So there still can be that mindset of like kind of remedial reasons for working with a coach.
so do
Um,
these clients that are concerned about that, do they pay you out of their own pocket, or are they?
no, I mean, they get funded by the company, but it may only be between them and their manager or their leader, and then of course like HR or something, just so they know. But they may not be sharing that as much with the team, or they may also have concerns that if their team were to work with the same coach, then does stuff get talked about? And of course, confidentiality is like the core ethical aspect of coaching, but there still can be concern depending on the organization, depending on relationships with teams. So there's I mean, Japanese people are just more private in general, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's
that
interesting.
that can be a tricky aspect of the work. Yeah.
I had never thought of that. Okay. And so during this 4 or 5 day period out in Minakami, other than that one day when you're putting somebody in an unusual experience out of their comfort zone, so to speak, in a natural environment,
Yep.
what happens during the other days?
So day one is they usually come out by around lunchtime. So this is of the first half day, and they first come to my office here instead of going right into the deeper parts of Minakami. And it's starting to slow things down, get them used to a different pace, get them start to assimilate a bit more with nature, and to see like what are some things that they just really need to let go of so that they can be fully present during the time. Then we go out. The partners that I use for these are these really beautiful glamping locations. We're at the big mountain that we were just talking about before we started. So really gorgeous area, but really comfortable accommodations. The guy who runs the place is a chef, and so the food is amazing. And it's a small place, so we get it to ourselves. They basically have their own private accommodation while they're here. Um, and so day two is really about like slowing down even more, doing some stuff like breath work, taking some light walks, and continually having these different coaching conversations about the things that they want to create. Because again, the outcome on day four is to leave ideally with not only a vision, but kind of a plan of like what will things look like in the next year and what will key milestones be along the way. So we're having regular conversations around that. Um, and part of what day two is about is really kind of regenerating, right? Executives and leaders are like super busy, often overworked. And so even just having a day to like take naps, maybe get a massage, go to the onsen, go to sauna, it's really a regenerative day. And then the day three is kind of like the climax where they go on the adventure. um, that night, we usually have a barbecue, have a beer, and just like celebrate kind of what we've come through up until that time. And then day four is really just tying it together, looking at what they've put together, making sure it's as clear as it can be, and then talking a little bit about how to then integrate this back into their work as they go back. And that's why the follow up of coaching from there on is so critical, that it doesn't just stay here, right? That it actually goes with them, and it's can be really challenging to bring this type of experience back into your work, and to stay accountable to the things you've committed to. And so working with someone on a regular basis, I usually work with clients like every 2 weeks or so for an hour long online session. So that really helps. Yeah.
That's great. And so do they, after that, do they ever go back to visit you in Minakami or?
Sometimes, yep.
Oh,
Sometimes
okay.
we'll do follow-up sessions. Sometimes we'll have teams come out. I work with teams out here as well. And so that's kind of an ideal situation for me, is where I get to work with some of the leadership, but then they also bring teams out, and we work with their teams out here.
Okay. And
And
so when
there's a
you
lot of
say
that.
teams, how many people are we talking about max that you can accommodate?
I've done up to around 20 people. And often when I do that, I'll have a co-coach or a co-facilitator in the work. And, Minakami has lots of different accommodation to take bigger groups as well. So yeah, probably that's probably the max. The ideal for me is probably 8 or 12. That's a nice size group, but we can
Okay.
do a little bit bigger also.
But the primary focus, though, is one-on-one coaching, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm moving more and more into teamwork because I'm understanding more and more like the systemic nature of the work, meaning that leaders don't work in isolation, right? They work in a system of teams and organizations, and teams also do as well. So, and going back to the impact piece, if you get to impact the way that teams work, then that also then has a bigger organization, and a team like so complex because it's a group of all these people with their patterns, and then these different patterns that show up when they're all together. And so I'm actually I'm been doing some team coaching, and I'm getting my ICF certification to be a team coach right now because I see more and more the value in that, and I think organizations are seeing that more too.
I see. So in that case, do you sometimes go to the client on site, on their site, rather
Yep.
than have them come to you? Okay.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
great.
team coaching, I mean, it is something that I do online, but really getting to do that in person is helpful. Yeah. I mean, you want to see people in the room. You want to see the way they're sitting. You know, you want to see like how their face changes when one person talks versus another person. And yeah, so it's great to be able to be in person for that.
Oh, this is good. So it sounds like business is going well. How do you recruit new clients?
Well, I have a commitment to being really open and transparent, and that's like the biggest thing that I'm in right now. Like this has been the hardest start to the year of my business in 5 years, and that's exactly it. Is I I don't think I spent enough time really working on like business development and recruiting new clients in the first 4 years, partly because those platforms that I mentioned were quite easy ways to have clients come in. But they're also kind of lower value, both in terms of pay, but also in terms of I don't have as much say in the program that we create, customizing for each client because generally the platforms have these approaches they want you to work with. And so, yeah, I'm in it right now of just like, oh shit, how am I going to make this work? Because I've had a few key clients drop off for different reasons, and so I'm working on that right now. One is social media. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and I enjoy writing, and I've enjoyed getting that work out there. But to be completely honest, it doesn't really lead to direct clients happening yet. So what I'm doing more of is trying to meet with people in person. So I started something last year that I call Monday Adventures, which is where I invite basically anyone to come out to Minakami for a day and just go on an adventure with me. Um, and that's partly because I take Mondays off to do my own adventures, but I got kind of bored with just doing it by myself and wanted to have people come out. But I also wanted to explore like what are my ways of networking, not just going to like an ACCJ chamber event and handing cars out to people, which is it's great, it's effective for some people, but I'd rather like really connect with people. And so having people come out for a day, share Minakami with them, have lunch together, do something wild. So that's one thing. And then I have been taking more trips into Tokyo, going to events that interest me, making connections there. Um, and yeah, that's what I'm in right now.
Okay, great. Well, hey, the real Gaijin will do its best to promote your service too. Got that, everyone listening? All right, terrific. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I'm not kidding. I will definitely help you. With regards to, oh, I know what I wanted to ask. Are most of your clients men?
Interesting that you asked that, and I haven't looked at the numbers, but probably, yeah.
Right.
Part of that is because for about a year and a half, I led a men's group called Keyaki. Keyaki is a type of tree, and actually that name was inspired by this big, beautiful tree right here. Um, so yeah, I worked with, I led some men's group for a while, and I think that kind of got an image for me, particularly in Japan, of someone who works primarily with men. And yeah, I have, and I think there is a kind of a particular thing about the way that men operate in Japan, like both foreign men and Japanese men, that can be really challenging. And so I have worked with a lot of men, but I also support a lot of female clients as well.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And wonderful. What, how about a particular industry, or is it industry agnostic essentially?
Yeah, still pretty industry agnostic at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And all right. And then, so let's see what else. The, the time commitment for one of your clients then after you finish.
Hmm.
I mean, I suppose it could be all the time, but you mentioned something like checking in with them for about an hour or so every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, what do they expect to be doing in the meantime in terms of, like, do they have to keep journals or anything like that? Or
Yeah, so they have practices that they work on. So the kind of the goal, the trajectory of one coaching session is number one. So the foundation is the project that they've designed for the year, right? So that's always what we're working towards in terms of how they create value from the work. But then uh, each coaching session is issues that potentially related to moving forward in that project. And so the trajectory of one session is we start off with like them clearly identifying what do they want to leave the session with. And so then we get into, whatever needs to come up in that. And by the end, we're moving towards like, okay, what's your practice based on this session? Right. And so, if it's a particular way of being or a type of communication or something like that, but that's what they're working on in between sessions. And it really varies. It's up to them, right? I don't, again,
yeah,
I'm not a teacher assigning homework. I'm basically saying, what do you think you need to work on based on what has come up in the session? What are the challenges for you? What are you like declaring or committing to? And then we get to check on that again in the next session.
got it. And I imagine that most of your clients get pretty good at meeting their goals or stated objectives. What do you do to course correct if you find somebody going off on the wrong tangent?
Well, so that's an interesting question. One, it's not my job to course correct, right?
Hmm.
Um, but it is my job to, again, reflect things. And so, for example, if I notice a pattern and that a client makes a declaration about things that they're going to do multiple sessions in a row and they don't do them, then I bring that up, right? I notice that you make commitments and you're not following through on them, right? And the thing I want to be really clear on is it's not my job to make them wrong for that, right? It's just like we're noticing that this is happening. Tell me about it. What's your experience of that? What does that make possible or impossible for you? And let them start to decide if they want to do something about it or not. Uh, but then also, a big part of my responsibility is to be aware of what they said they want to create in the work and see are we moving towards that, right? Are they really getting the value out of the work that they said they wanted through the results they said they wanted? And if not, then again, that's my job is to bring that up and reflect it back and see what they want to do about it.
Oh, that's very valuable. Okay, that's terrific. Cory, I mean, listening to you, looking at this beautiful view behind you, do you have any competition in Japan? I mean, who else
Oh
even
yeah.
does this?
Well, I would say it's the opposite, and is that no one, I don't think anyone is really doing it this way, and therefore I'm not really on people's radar, right? Like when people think of executive and leadership coaches, it's a guy or a woman, in a nice suit, that they really look like they have executive experience. Particularly in Asia, right? Particularly, it's
Mm.
like this coach as expert, coach as advisor is really what people have in mind,
Mm.
especially when we're talking about a high level investment.
Well, that's true.
Um, so I think it's more of me not being on people's radar, but like them getting to see like why this way that I work would serve them. And also I'm really aware that the way that I work probably doesn't serve a lot of people. Right. There's a particular type of client out there. And this is, in kind of identifying who the people are that I work with, this kind of clunky term I've come up with is the underexpressed adventurous leader. And what that means for me is leaders who, for example, in the past may have been a lot more adventurous, but somehow they've lost that. They've gotten caught into the day to day or like fitting in their organization, and they've kind of lost that. Or it's someone who has kind of never really been that, but has this desire to like take more risks, try different things in their organization, help their organization to try different things. And there's something that's in the way of that. And so I realized that it's a relatively small category of leaders, I think, but those are the people that I want to find, because that, I think this way of working really serves them. It allows them to see like, well, actually, when I do step out of what's comfortable for me, I can do it, right? And
Yeah.
I might screw up, I might get hurt, but I can do it and I can learn from it. And so, yeah, looking for those types of clients. There are a lot of really good coaches in Japan, man. There are a lot of, most of them are based in Tokyo. Some of them are increasingly, like I know several coaches who have moved out of Tokyo as well. So yeah, there's some really high quality people working in Japan, which is amazing because I get to be colleagues with them, right? And I get to
Yeah.
talk with them and work in development spaces with them as well.
With regards to risk taking, now, as an American who worked in Japan for a long time for an American firm, uh, okay, that kind of comes naturally. But for your Japanese clients, I mean, I can imagine they have a whole other set of needs here when it comes to feeling free to take
Yeah.
risks.
Yeah.
Could you comment about that?
Yeah, I would say kind of one of the biggest lessons that I need to learn in this work is meeting clients where they're really at. Because I think part of the way my kind of Americanism shows up, in addition to like the comfort with risk, is like idealism. Oh, you should be at this level like right now. Let's just go for it, man. Let's try these different things. And you just lose people, right? People shut down or they like stop showing up to coaching sessions or something like
Oh,
that. So it's learning to meet people where they're really at, and like the older I get, the more I understand that like the way people define adventure is perfect for them, right? And
mm,
so my intention is to meet them in that. And again, these retreats that I do, I think I've gotten better and better with that, because it's not about pushing people to the edge of a literal cliff, right? It could be like them saying yes to come and doing this retreat is huge already. Our job is to hold them in that decision and be like, yeah, you're in this, amazing. Let's take some small steps together and really make sure you feel like you're in partnership with me here. And the adventure may be like, it may just be like a walk. It may be a simple hike that doesn't even involve much climbing, because it's so much already to be, out of their typical environment and all that. So yeah, that's I think you're spot on about like Japan and even Asian levels of comfort with risk, and how important it is for coaches to meet clients exactly where they are at work.
what kind of feedback have you been getting from your graduates?
Generally, that this work in particular is super impactful. It's
Hmm.
it's the work that we do, coaching that work that we do, but also the environment of Minakami. It's just such a special place. Every season has something to offer. The community here is really amazing. Not that clients don't really get to mix in with the community other than the partners that I work with here. Um, but I think people are really impacted by the combination of this kind of wild setting, but also the approach of coaching, looking at the level of people's being as opposed to just like action-based performance. Like who are they being underneath the performance? What are the patterns that show up? What's the different like psychology that guides that? And not that I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. I don't get into that too much, but we are working with people's kind of deeper patterns and the way that they've shown up, the protection mechanisms that they have developed over the years to make them feel safe, that actually don't work anymore in their current environment or at their current level of role.
That's great. Hey, terrific about Adventure Partner. I just looked at the clock here. Time has flown by. I'm not surprised actually. But can you talk a little bit more about another area of interest for you, which is the
Sure.
Inaka Business Network?
Sure. Yeah. And I also saw there was one question that popped up. I'm not sure how you manage that, but I want to make sure we get to one person's
Thanks.
question. Um, but yeah, I'm completely in love with Minakami and plan to spend the rest of my days here, and so want to see how I can have some kind of small impact. So I've had a few different projects that I've been running in the community. In my newest one, which we haven't kicked off yet, but we will kick off soon, and it's actually why I've gotten involved in Substack, and that is to interview different business owners in Minakami, first of all, to learn what's the experience of being a rural Japan business owner. What are the resources that people wish they had? What are the different connections that people wish that they had? And then, assuming that that goes well, to broaden to other rural areas, talk with people. Again, these will be YouTube videos and podcasts, but eventually to establish a network. If all these conversations points in the direction that that would be useful, to develop a network of businesses across Japan, so that we can be a resource for each other. One of business owners' favorite things to do in rural Japan is to complain about the yakuba, the local town office, or the shokokai, right? They're never slow enough, they're never innovative enough, and sure, that's all true. So what? So what can we do about it, right? So why don't we work on things together? Because, as you know, man, there's so much cool shit happening in rural Japan now. There's so many good businesses, and it's not just, it's like non-Japanese people and Japanese people. It's the there are these three funny terms in Japan. So I turn, basically when someone moves to somewhere else, it's like an I, like a direct, you move from one place to another. And then a U-turn is when people leave the rural area and they come back again, right? And those U-turn people are particularly interesting because they've gotten a taste of the city and they've missed home and they've missed what makes home special, but they've brought different things back with them. So I really feel like time right now is a really key time of potential in rural Japan, and I want to be a part of that.
Well, that's terrific. What an amazing vision. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, please, for our listeners, we have quite a few online right now. Please feel free to ask a question, and I promise we will check between the two of us. Yes, we have a question. What is the most rewarding part of your job? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you get to have an impact on someone else's life, it's just amazing. And coaching is such a special way to do that. Because what's tricky about, or what's interesting about coaching is that the work also works on you, right? And so what I mean by that is like the patterns and stuff that I see in my clients. I'm inevitably matched up with clients who have some of the same shit that I do. It's all, ask any coach and they'll tell you the same thing. And there's something about, we attract the people that have kind of similar things to work on that we need to work on. And so not only do I get to support my clients and really impact their businesses and their lives, and I can't stress enough how much, like, I'm a leadership coach and I work with people in their businesses, but I can't stress enough how much people bring their personal lives into the work because they're people, right? So we really do rounded work. So anyways, we get to impact their businesses and their work, but also then that work gets to work on me. I get to see more of myself reflected in them. I work with my own coach and my mentor on that to kind of bring my own level up. And so I continually get to see myself evolve, like, as a human in the work, by getting to work with these clients who are willing to be so open with me in the work.
Wonderful. Wow. That's what a rewarding, not really a job, but, uh,
Yeah, it's definitely
long-term
a job.
commitment
It's
you have.
definitely a job. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Still is a job. Okay.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right, good. That's a great question. If anyone else has a question, please feel free to put that in there and we'll try to keep track of this on our mobile phone while doing everything else. Hey, you are a perfect example of a long-term and very successful foreign business operator in Japan, and you're doing something that is not common. You started out teaching English, which is common, but nevertheless, especially for Westerners, what you're doing here is really something very different. I'm curious, what other kind of opportunities do you see for non-Japanese people who are living long-term in Japan?
Hmm. It's really hard to answer in a way that's not biased to where I am. You know, I credit so much of being able to do what I've done to the community that I landed in. You know, rural Japan can be known to be quite closed to outsiders, even Japanese outsiders, right? And Minakami is just so different than that. Um, so I would just, for me, it always comes back to community. Find a place where you can have community, and then from there, you know, kind of whatever your vision is, I think it becomes more possible because you are supported in doing it, right? There's no way I would be able to do any of the stuff that I'm doing if we didn't have people here. Like my kids are supported in the school that they go to, but they also have good friends here. My wife is supported in her friend network. We have neighbors that regularly deliver us fresh vegetables, and we also do the same with what we make. And so without this like foundational setting of community, it's really hard to do things that you're uncomfortable with or that you've never done. So, you know, if you're interested in rural Japan, you know, what connections do you have to the place? How can you just immediately show up and start to be useful in some way?
Mm.
You know, like one of the first things that I did when I moved here was help out with the local weed cutting, you know, that, you know, get the weed whackers out. Yeah. And man, it's like this simple thing that you can do for a couple of hours and people immediately see like, okay, you're here for the work. You're here to show up and do the things that other people do. And then all of a sudden these little opportunities pop up. People trust you. The whole reason we were able to build the house that I'm at and rezone the land from agricultural to like zoned for housing was because of that work, right? Otherwise, it would have been much. Yeah.
That is very interesting. I think we lost you for a second there, but now you're back.
Okay.
Yeah, curiously, literally the next morning after we moved down here at 6 o'clock in the morning, knock on the door.
Yeah.
Would you please help with the weed?
Yeah. Yeah.
The whole community's out here at
Yeah.
your doorstep at 6 in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
we
right.
did that too. I could have said no, but now it was right
Yeah.
to say yes.
Yeah.
Good to hear that.
Good. Good. Awesome.
All right, quick shout out for our listeners here. If there are any more questions, we've got just a couple of minutes left before our hour is up, but please feel free to put that in there.
Can I
Corey,
share
this
one
is
other thing, Mark, that
yes,
I'm up to that's been really fun? From
please.
last year, I've started guiding motorcycle tours in Japan. So if anybody that's watching or listening rides, Japan has really amazing roads. So like really nice condition roads. The mountain roads are really incredible. We have great bike rentals here. The accommodations are amazing. The food is amazing. So if you really want a unique way to see kind of off the beaten path Japan, it's really fun. And I do that with a partner whose name is Satoshi. If you look up Satoshi Rides, that's his website. It's really his venture, and I'm supporting his work. But we've got some fun stuff coming up in the fall. So for anyone that wants to come and ride, it's really fun.
That is terrific. Yeah, well, I completely agree with you on the roads. As you know, I like to cycle, and yeah, certain prefectures have better roads than others. But I Gunma in particular probably has great roads due to the drifting, right?
That's right.
The motorcycle adventure, excellent,
Yeah,
terrific.
yeah, yeah,
Well, Cory, thank you for spending
yeah.
1 hour with Real Japan today, and for our listeners, thank you very much for your active participation. I think, well, I got a lot out of this, and it's very encouraging to hear about how Cory is being successful in his multiple roles, but particularly adventure partner.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's fun, and looking forward to meeting you in person at your place, at mine, or both. I love the area that you're in, also. So can't wait to get down there again.
Excellent. Same. Yeah, we were comparing the fact that we live near mountains with twin peaks. I live
That's
near
right.
Mufudake in
Yeah,
Kyushu.
yeah, yeah.
Great. All right, Cory, we will let you go back to that beautiful environment that I see behind you. It looks like you got a
Great.
busy day planned.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Enjoy the day.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
お疲れ様でした。
Thanks for watching and or listening to another story from the Read My Lips series of podcasts on Real Gaijin. Tell us what you think and be sure to tune in again next time.